presentation, Finding Funding with the Foundation Center. I'm Usma Ziard, Senior Marketing Director here at GuideStar. Before we get started, I need to take care of a few housekeeping items. We will be live tweeting during today's presentation using the hashtag Finding Funding. So we hope you can all join our conversation on Twitter. Secondly, we are happy to take questions from all of you during the presentation. We will try to answer as many questions as possible before our time is up. To submit a question, please use the feature on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. If we cannot get to all your questions before our time is up, we'll post more of your questions on our blog at trust.guidestar.org. And finally, we'll be sending you all an email with the demo slides and a recording of this live presentation in a few days. Before I go ahead and introduce our speakers, I'd like to take a few minutes to give you a very quick summary of what the GuideStar Exchange is. So what is the GuideStar Exchange? It is a free tool that gives your organization the opportunity to showcase their commitment to transparency and communicate more effectively with stakeholders. There are 3 levels to the GuideStar Exchange program: Gold, Silver, and Bronze. In exchange for the information provided by your organization, you can receive great incentives. This slide previews a few of the incentives that we offer. For example, discounts on various valuable resources that is provided by our wonderful partners. Your organization's information that you provide will be distributed to our partner network. And of course, there are many, many more incentives. Why is the GuideStar Exchange important? This slide goes into the details of that, but in summary, it allows your organization to have an online presence and tell your organization's story to foundations and other supporters in a very compelling way. To get started with the GuideStar Exchange program, it's really simple. Please visit www.guidestar.org and click on the Update Your Nonprofit Report tab in the yellow navigation. With that, I'm happy now to introduce our speakers: George Ford, Product Manager, Online Subscription Services at the Foundation Center. As Product Manager for Online Subscription Services, including the Foundation's directory online, he's responsible for its day-to-day oversight and development of new program enhancements. And Leeanne G-Bowley. Leeanne is the Manager of National Training at the Foundation Center. In addition to coordinating Foundation Center's full-day and multi-day courses, she teaches select courses and webinars and answers reference questions from grant seekers. George, we're happy to have you here, and the floor is all yours.
Well, thank you, and thanks to GuideStar for hosting us and giving us an opportunity to talk about Foundation Directory Online as well as our training programs. I'm going to start by going through a demonstration of using Foundation Directory Online. First, a little bit about the Foundation Center for those of you who aren't familiar with us. Our mission is to strengthen the social sector by advancing knowledge about philanthropy in the U.S. and around the world. We're the leading information about philanthropy worldwide, established in 1956. We are headquartered here in New York, and we have field offices in Atlanta, Cleveland, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., as well as over 470 cooperating collections, which I should now begin calling Philanthropy Information Network partners, actually. And those are libraries and other centers that carry our collection of print and online resources. Foundation Directory Online Professional, which is the service that I'll be demonstrating for you all, is a database of foundation and other institutional grant makers that you can search by fields of interest, by where they're located, by where they give, and many other criteria that we'll look at. Right now it contains over 120,000 grant makers. These are private, corporate, community foundations, corporate giving programs, public charities, and we've recently added some non-U.S. grant makers to that set as well. We also have records of many of their grants going back to 2003. We have a searchable 990 database that you can keyword search, a database of companies that sponsor some giving programs. Power Search, which allows you to search all those databases plus 5 more all in one search. Maps and charts, and thorough, accurate, up-to-date information, and we'll be taking a deeper look at that now. We will look for how to find funders that support your area of interest, that support you based on where you're located and the types of support that you need, and using some of the tools that support your search, like saving your searches, exporting your results, and doing some other functions as well. So I will now go ahead and I'm going to share my screen so I can demonstrate FDO for you. So you should see now the welcome screen for Foundation Directory Online. I do want to take a moment to talk about something that's brand new, which is we just released yesterday, actually, a free version of FDO, and we'll take a quick look at it. Basically, this allows you to look up foundations by name or location. There you can see that there are some areas that you do need to be a subscriber to access, and these are some of the areas we'll be looking at in the main part of the demo. But if you go to fdo.foundationcenter.org, you can actually get a look at some of the things that FDO includes and sort of get a handle on how FDO works. But what I'll spend my time in is with FDO Professional, which is the flagship level of Foundation Directory Online and has all of the search functionality and information available. What we're looking at here first is called Power Search. This is a function that lets you search across 9 different databases at once. So if I were to do a basic search for something like arts education, what I would get in my results would be not just one kind of result, but I would actually get all the grant makers that match those keywords, all of the grant records, the 990s, companies if available, and they didn't come back in this particular search. But in addition to all that core content in Foundation Directory Online, you get philanthropy news from Philanthropy News Digest, requests for proposals, research reports that come from our service called Issue Lab, our library catalog of nonprofit literature, as well as jobs also from Philanthropy News Digest. You can see a preview of the first few results from each of these, and if you wanted to continue through and see the rest of the results, you just click the link to see the rest of that set of results. In this case, I'm looking at RFPs, and you can see they're all listed here, and if you want to take a look at one of them, just click the link, and that will take you over to the full RFP in Philanthropy News Digest. Works the same way if you're looking at news or any of the other categories. If you want to narrow your search down by any of the facets available on the left or additional keywords, you can do that right from the results screen, and that will just send you right through to the narrower set of results. To go back to your initial set, just deselect the database that you chose, and you'll go back to the full set of Power Search results from the 9 different databases. What I'm going to spend more time, though, and most of our time doing is discussing the Search Grant Makers area. This is where you can conduct sort of custom, refined search based on a number of criteria to get right at what you're looking for. And I want to give you a little overview of what's available before demonstrating a simple search. You can search for grant makers by name, either by typing it in or using the index to select a grant maker. We do recommend using the indexes because if there are small differences in the spelling or the punctuation, the index allows you to make sure you're getting the right result. Grant maker location, you can search by state or country, county, city, metropolitan area, congressional district, or zip code. Those are the location fields, but what you can also do is instead of searching by where the grant maker is located, you can search by where they give. So we have the geographic focus index, which I've opened here on the left, and from there you can select, let's say I want to find funders that give to recipients on the West Coast. If I wanted to do that, I could select California, as well as Oregon and Washington. So now it's going to look for any of these. The or between the terms mean that it's going to look for any rather than all of those terms. I'll do one more thing, which is to add national, just to make sure that I'm also capturing funders that do give nationally, but that don't necessarily specify any one of those states. Next, I'm going to show, maybe select a field of interest or two. This is probably the field that's you'll use most often in using Foundation Directory Online. It lets you find out what population groups, what subject areas that a funder is interested in. So let's say I want to see funders that fund programs or organizations that work in medical research. If I go to the M from the list and scroll down, I can see not only can I select the broadest category of medical research, I also have the option of selecting any of these subcategories. And I'll see right away in the parentheses how many results I would get if I just selected that term. But I'm going to choose the broader medical research. Maybe if I wanted to, I could add, I've selected H, and I would see, well, there's several healthcare fields of interest that I could also choose, as well as their subcategories. I'm going to leave the broader search, though, so we get a nice large set of results to take a look at. I'm not going to select a type of support, but I do want to discuss this a little bit. The types of support are a part of the taxonomy that allows you to specify what the grant is intended for, meaning it could be general operating support, it could be program development, it could be for your endowment, it could be for a capital campaign. It also can define what form the grant itself takes. So you could specify that you're looking for funders that do in-kind giving. You could specify that you want to find funders that do one or another kind of pro bono services. So you would use types of support for either of those cases, what the grant is intended for or what form the grant itself takes. And there's a link for a list of all of these terms and their definitions at the top. You could also search by the names of trustees, officers, or donors to see where there's some connections you might be able to make between your organization and different funders. And you can specify a range of total assets, giving, or establishment year. If you wanted to find more newly established foundations, you could do it that way. But what I'm going to do is take this relatively basic search with just two of the criteria. And the reason I want to do that is the more criteria you enter in different fields, the narrower your set of results is going to be. If you keep it broad at first, you can always refine it further, and that's what we'll do. So I'm going to just sort these by total giving, medical research on the West Coast states or national, and I'm going to see a set of 675 results. And that's a fairly large set, so what I could do is narrow that down. Before I do that, I did see a message come in, so I want to make sure I'm not. Okay, so I'm just, all right, so back to the results. We have 675, but I want to narrow that down a little bit. Before I do that, I just want to show some of the terms that are available. I'm sorry, some of the tools that are available. You can print and save these records if you select any or all of them. You can print and save just the list, and those will both be PDFs. You can export the list to spreadsheet. Save the search if I wanted to create a name for this search, medical research on the West Coast or whatever term I wanted to give that, and just save that. I'd be able to go back and access that saved search in what's called the MyFDO area. But what I'll do now is I want to go ahead and get a smaller set of results. So if you notice on the left here, you have some choices. You could look at grant makers located in particular states, certain types of grant maker. The one I'm interested in is this last one where it says applications accepted. There are a number of foundations, as most of you probably know, that give only to pre-selected organizations. If I wanted to filter those out and just look at those that accept unsolicited applications, I can do that by clicking yes. And then that'll narrow down to 295 results. We don't always necessarily recommend doing that or doing that at first. You want to get a broader sense of what's available in the area you're interested in. There can be other ways to get on funders' radar. But for convenience sake, you might want to look, you might find yourself wanting to look just at those that do accept applications. So now I'm down to 295 results, and I want to take a moment to look at a foundation profile. The one I selected is the Eli and Edith Broad Foundation. And I'll just sort of take you through the kind of information. It's very detailed, and I want to show you just some of the highlights. First and foremost, in the at-a-glance area, you can see you have their address. They have changed their name in the past, so you can see what it was formerly known as. Basic financial data, just their assets and giving. There's more detail on that available further down in the profile. Also, all of their 990PF in PDF form, going back, in this case, as far as 2001. So you can select any of these to open their any of their recent Form 990s. It's taking a second to load, so I'll just go back to the profile. What you can do from there is use any of these links on the left to jump down and get more information about a particular field. A good one to look at early on is the limitations field, because that might be a way where you can rule out a foundation early on without spending more of your time doing more research on it if maybe you can tell right away that it's not a good prospect. In this case, they say they give on a national basis, and the only limitation seems to be that they don't give grants to individuals. So if you wanted to look further, simply keep going, and you have their mission statement under the purposes and activities field. You have, in this case, fairly detailed looking program areas. Now, that won't always be the case. This is a larger foundation. Some smaller, maybe, for example, family foundations might not quite have this level of detail. But in this case, you can learn a lot about their different programs, including some email addresses of who to contact or URLs to learn more. We were looking for medical research, and you can see there's a broad medical research program, so there's a whole paragraph describing the program that seems to relate to what we searched on. But I'm going to move down a little further and just show some of the other highlights. The terms that we searched on are highlighted in red. So the field of interest term that we chose and the geographic focus of national are both visible here, highlighted, so you know why this record came back in your search results. And another one I want to highlight is application information. In this case, sometimes you get a lot more detail than this. In this case, they just direct you to their website because each program area has different policies and guidelines. But they do request that you submit certain information that's listed here, and they note that the deadline is on a rolling basis. Sometimes the field that you'll see here is called initial approach. And that's a valuable one for seeing, does the foundation want a letter of inquiry first? Do they want you to fill out an online application? Do they take a common grant application? If they do accept a common grant application, that will be linked to right in the profile. And any other application information that you might need. Quickly through some of these other fields, you see their officers and directors. You can see any affiliations that some of these individuals have. And as I mentioned a moment ago, there is somewhat more detailed financial data available in this financial data field, including any gifts that they received and additional giving activities outside of grants. In this case, they have some PRIs and loans that they do, and those are listed here. Just to go back up to the top of the screen, there are other ways that you can see more detail about their grant making. You can search their grants using a search field with different grant recipient and grant subject criteria that you can select here. You can also see their grants displayed on a U.S. or world map, and I'll just select that. This may take there we go, quick second to load. So you can see the U.S. map, and the shading indicates where more or fewer of those grants have gone. My search was for the West Coast. I can see, well, they, only a couple of recipients in Washington State, a couple in Oregon, but there are many, many more in California. So if I were to select California, I'll get a map of that state that I can view by county, city, zip code, or congressional district. I can also limit my view based on what year the grants were made, or what year they were authorized, I should say, and what type of recipient. So I selected medical research, so I'll go ahead and select that and see what comes up. Now, there's actually only a handful. They're in Los Angeles County. If I select that, now I can look and see what were the recipients, and I could actually view a grant record. And I've selected this one for the Prostate Cancer Foundation. And we'll look at another grant record in a moment, but just to give you an idea of what kind of information is available, you have access to recipient information, including URL, what type of recipient we've coded it as, and then the recipient's 990 forms. Other information on the grant, the amount, what it was intended for, in this case general operating support, and how it was coded. You could also send an email copy of this grant record to colleagues. You can print it out or create a tag for it that lets you select or type in a new tag, and it's another way of going back and for reference to see some of the what you've wanted to save and list and keep in your MyFDO folder. You can do a similar thing, which I won't demonstrate in the same level of detail, but I do want to show you can also see their grant making on a chart based on type of recipient. You can see the vast majority of the Broad Foundation's funding is in the area of education, which is indicated here on the chart. You do the same thing you can on the maps where you drill down to subcategories and then tertiary categories and then view the recipients and the grant records. In addition to that, you have news related to this foundation. You have their social media channels. In this case, you have a live view of their Facebook page, a link to their Twitter. The Twitter account should actually load here, but it didn't for whatever reason, so the link is available if the feed doesn't. Someone is pointing me out that I keep mispronouncing the name of the foundation. It's the Broad Foundation. Sorry about that. And it's a fairly famous foundation, so I probably should have known that. Thank you for correcting me about that. So, saving myself further embarrassment, I'll close out of the Broad Foundation's record and show just a couple of the other search databases. You can search grants, and I'll look at this next because it's probably the second most valuable database after the Search Grantmakers database. Search Grants lets you find who has funded organizations like yours, and you can define that a number of ways. You can define it based on where you're located, searching by recipient location, state, country, county, again, metropolitan area, et cetera. Also by recipient type. So in this case, let's change our example up a little bit. If we maybe are looking for a certain kind of arts organization, let me look at performing arts. So I'll go to the P's and go performing arts. Let's choose ballet. So we'll do performing arts ballet, recipient type. I can choose this from a similar set of taxonomic terms using the subject area. The difference is recipient type defines the organization, or it's how we have defined the organization. Subject indicates how we have defined the actual grant. So often those are the same. Sometimes there's a slight difference. So I'll do recipient type, and then I'll also do location. And let me find all of the grants to performing arts, ballet, organizations in a given state. So let me select, let's go with Connecticut. So we'll do ballet in Connecticut and see how many grants we get back. I could also choose types of support. I could define this by looking at a certain number of years that the grants were authorized. I could also look at certain grant amounts. But like I did on the grant maker search, I want to start a little broader, see whether I get a lot or only a few results, and then decide from there whether I want to broaden that set or narrow it down. So I'm going to sort these by year authorized, descending, so I'm looking at the newest ones first. And I've got 114 grants, as recent as 2012 in this case. We do have some 2013 grants. I'll pause at this point and just talk a little bit about the sources of data for Foundation Directory Online. Besides the 990PFs to foundations that we base a lot of the content on, we do have relationships with grant makers where they will send us information on their foundations either by responding to questionnaires that we send out regularly or through what we call the FC Updater program that lets them update their information electronically. On the grant side, we have a program called eGrant Reporting that allows them to send us their grants in a spreadsheet, through a grant management software plugin, and various other ways. And this is what allows us to have grants as recent as 2012 or 2013 because we haven't necessarily had to wait for those 990s to be available. If you're only waiting for the 990PFs, that grants information might be a year or two old. So we are able to get, for some foundations, newer grant information than that. We did look at a grant record earlier. I do want to show another one, but first just to demonstrate that, again, you can narrow this down. If I wanted to see all of the grants made by the first grant maker on this list, the Frank Loomis Palmer Fund, If I wanted to see all 16 of this particular foundation's grants, I just select that, and now I'm looking at those. My criteria is always available at the top left corner, and I can broaden it back out by deselecting any of these, or continue to narrow it by making additional selections. But let me go ahead and look at one of these records. It's a $6,500 grant from Palmer to the Mystic Ballet. And again, as with the record we saw earlier, you have information on the recipient, you have information on the grant. Only a couple of lines of information on the grant maker, and the reason for that is if you want to learn more about the funder, all you have to do is select the tab at the top that says grant maker, and you'll go right to this funder's full profile where you can learn everything that you need to know about, as we looked at earlier, application information, fields of interest, who are their trustees, what are their financials, et cetera, and take a look at their grant maps and charts. I won't demonstrate a company search, but I do want to point out what's available here. If you wanted to look for corporate funders like corporate foundations or giving programs, you can do that in the grant makers area. But if you wanted to search profiles of the actual for-profits that sponsor those, you would do that here in Search Companies. So you can search by business type, you can see where either the headquarters or a subsidiary is located, look at the corporate profile, and then from there see what funding outlets they have. With 990s, you don't have the indexes, but you do have a keyword field, fiscal year, grant maker name, and you can go ahead and look at the actual IRS tax documents for the funders in the database. We have a little over 3 million of these. I'm sorry, we have over 3 million grants. We have a little over 1 million 990s. And I do want to point out, because I mentioned it a couple of times, MyFDO. MyFDO is where if you have created tags for any grant maker, company, or grant records, the tags that you've created are available here. And if you want to look at what you did tag, if I just select one of those, I can see all of the grants that I tagged as food bank. I can then create a list of these or remove any from the list. If I go back, I can also see the searches that I've saved, and something that I didn't mention earlier, which is email alerts. You can, looking at any program or any foundation profile, you just select this checkbox next to Add to My Alerts, and you'll get an email alert every time there's significant new information about this funder, whether it's new grants, a new annual report, a new 990, and information of that nature. Finally, I just want to show Update Central. Update Central is an area of the site that lets you see what is new to the database, what grant makers have been added, what grant makers have shown high growth in their giving or have had recent changes. And if you want to create a custom report from that information, you can select new grant makers, you can select one or more states, and if I wanted to see all of the new grant makers in Colorado from the past months, I just do that, and I can see there's one. It's in Denver Health and Hospitals, and I can see their record that way. There will be time for Q&A at the end, so if there's anything I covered a little too quickly, or if there's anything you'd like me to go back over, we can handle that in the Q&A, which will be the last 10 or so minutes of the presentation. To learn more about subscribing to FDO, there are 5 plan levels. And you can go to find this on our site, and you can see there are different plan levels and the prices that are available, the amount of content that's available in each one. I covered professional. Also, of course, there is the free product, which is sort of a good starting place if you want to get a little more used to the content. That's at fdo.foundationcenter.org. And with that, I'm going to go back to our slideshow, and I'm going to turn it over to Leeanne, who will talk a little bit about our training. So thank you very much, and I'll be available to answer questions at the end.
Great. Well, thank you, George. I think that's a great introduction to Foundation Directory Online, which I think is a tool that's really important to our field, not just because I work at the Foundation Center, but also because I care about nonprofits. So thank you for sharing that. Now we're going to talk about grant seeker training at the Foundation Center. So my role is really to work on the educational side of what we do at the Foundation Center. As George mentioned, we were established in 1956, and we are a leading source on information on philanthropy worldwide. We have the information to share with nonprofits on philanthropy, how fundraising works, and we've been doing that for over 2 decades now. But the added bonus that's going on at the Foundation Center right now is that we've taken our really great, well-regarded curriculum and change the instructional design so that it actually helps people working in the field, so that you can take this information, use it practically in the classroom, and then apply it right away when you get back to your office. You know, lecture is great, getting lots of information is great, but we've actually redesigned our classes so that people get really practical use out of them. So I'll take you through a little bit about that, and then I'll tell you some of the classes we're offering now. And then I'll also give you some basic information about finding foundations in terms of what foundations are out there and who you might be looking for. So we do offer our classes throughout the country in our offices here in New York, and then in Atlanta, Cleveland, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., and Atlanta. We have staff in all of these locations, and we worked together to redesign this curriculum so that we're doing practical learning activities which encourage reflective reasoning. So that means you come into the classroom, you think you know certain things, you apply those concepts, and then you might leave the classroom going, oh, well, I knew what I was doing, I feel more empowered to do my work. Or you might come through and say, oh, you know, I always thought when I wrote a proposal I should approach it this way, but through the class and through the activities I have a new kind of perspective. We have people use their own proposals in the classroom, which does not always happen when you're working in a proposal writing class. A lot of times you're getting a case study or something like that. We do make case studies available for people who aren't currently working in a nonprofit, but if you're in this, you want to use the projects you're currently working on, and now we allow you to do that in the classes. And then we have a real-world focus. Our presenters, so including me, I have a life outside the Foundation Center as well, where I work, and it's funny, I don't think George knows this, I'm a contemporary ballet choreographer. So I work in the dance field in New York. So I've experienced working in the nonprofit sector, working at a large nonprofit, the Foundation Center, and then I get to teach these classes. So we really have expert knowledge from the presenters' perspective themselves. We have the expert knowledge of the Foundation Center, and we kind of bridge that gap between, you know, expert knowledge and real-world experiences in the classroom. And I've seen it really take hold for people and see people really feel like they have wonderful skills they've gotten during these classes and now can apply them. So what content are we talking about right now? Well, the Foundation Center is currently expanding our educational offerings, but what we offer right now, and you heard the mention of the 20% discount for in-person training. We have a proposal writers boot camp, which is 3 days long. We focus on proposal writing, giving you hands-on experience writing portions of the proposal, again, using your own work. We talk about proposal budgeting, and we do a full day with proposal budgeting, and we do a fun exercise where people actually make a budget together in a group at the end of the class. It really drives home the points of, you know, what makes a really successful budget. And then the third day we focus on funding research using the Foundation Directory online, and then also we have a mock funding panel. So there is homework during this class, and people go home and write a portion of the proposal and then present it to the group, and we have Foundation Center staff actually review the proposals right in front of everyone. So it's a really great experiential experience, obviously, and I think that's a really great way to gain some more knowledge about proposal writing. So that's if you want to go in for a full 3 days. We also have one-day courses, including a new Foundation Research Masterclass we're developing. So for people who, you know, have more experience with the Foundation Directory online, that class is really geared toward them. But we also have a class, Foundation Fundraising Essentials, that focuses on the basics of fundraising and using the database. We have the proposal writing workshop and also a corporate giving course. But as I mentioned, we are currently expanding our training offerings, so in 2014, stay tuned because there will be more offered. We also have online training and webinars. You are in an online training right now, so this might be of interest to you. These trainings are not currently part of the special discount you get with GuideStar, But they're really great, and I think they're worth checking out if you have an interest in these areas. One is specifically around outcome thinking. It's a 4-part series. We have one on building your nonprofit sustainability, which we've been doing for a while, and we get really great feedback on that one. And a brand new webinar series that's premiering this month, More Asking, Less Writing. So if you have experience writing proposals, but you're thinking, you know, how can I be more efficient around this? There's got to be a better way. That's what that webinar series really focuses on. And the series, the 4-part series is $2.99. They're $95 for each individual session, which you could do as well. The 3-part series are $239. Just things to think about if you're focused on those areas. And we also have some self-directed e-learning that's more click and read type of thing. More is coming down the pike in 2014 with our online learning. So if that's something that interests you, definitely stay tuned. So that's all great. I kind of sped through the promotional part of this. I think it's important, and I think I'm very proud of our training, but let's give you some context. So if you're doing some research using the Foundation Directory Online Professional, or you're coming to our class and you want to know more about fundraising, you need to know some of the basics, and let's talk about that. Let's talk about the world of grant makers, who supports nonprofits. When we're talking about grant makers, we're talking about institutional grant makers. So these are organizations that are set up to give away money to nonprofit organizations. There are 3 types we'll talk about right now: private foundations, direct corporate giving programs, and grant-making public charities. The reason it's important to get to know the different types of grant makers is it helps inform your searching and your relationships with these grant makers, because they're created in different ways. They're made by different types of people, and you want to know about them so you can approach them in the right manner. So first we'll talk about a private foundation. They're non-governmental nonprofit organizations. So they are nonprofits, but they're a special type of nonprofit. They have their own endowment or funds, so they're not raising money. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation isn't allowed to do an annual fundraiser because they're a private foundation. So they have their own funds, and they're managed by their own trustees and directors. But the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, or any other private foundation, is established to aid educational, social, religious, scientific, or other charitable activities through the making of grants. That means it's not the family's money, it's the money exists in this private foundation, and it must be used to aid these types of organizations. So that's a private foundation. The money typically for an independent foundation, which is the first type of private foundation, comes from a small group of people or a family. We typically call these family foundations, but it could come from a small group of like-minded people as well. So independent foundations can range from a very small foundation that was established by a school teacher who, put away savings and wants to sponsor scholarships, and it could be a very small institution, or it could be something like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation or the Ford Foundation, which are the largest foundations in the world. So there's a big range in those types, but we know it's coming from a particular place where it's usually people who start these independent foundations. And clearly their foundation is based on their own views of the world, what they want to improve in the world, and there's that kind of view when setting up that type of foundation. Whereas a company-sponsored foundation, the money originally comes from a company, but again, it's set up as a separate entity in order to aid nonprofits around a particular area. But we would understand with a company-sponsored foundation, they typically have interest in giving in specific areas. What areas? The areas where they have their business established, where they have clients or where they have potential production and things like that. So typically you'll see a company-sponsored foundation, some of the mission and definitely the geographic areas of interest are very aligned with where the company is working, but they are separate institutions. So those 2 types of foundations are required to have a 5% payout. It's on a rolling basis, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not as simple as every year they give away 5%. But there is a payout requirement where they have to give away 5% of their assets. So we have a presenter here at the Foundation Center who would say at the top of the crisis, the economic crisis, who is the one group of people who actually are required to keep giving away money? Private foundations. If they had assets, they had to give away money. The third type of private foundation is an operating foundation, and they're different because they don't have the payout requirement, but rather they're operating their own programs. So if you know of any research foundations, this is typical, where they have their endowment, but then they operate their own research. And so that's what we call an operating foundation. All three of these must disclose their total giving and grants through Form 990-PF. So just looking at these three types of private foundations, we understand an independent foundation approach is going to be very different from when you approach a company-sponsored foundation, which is different from approaching an operating foundation who might give grants, but it might not be as many as one of the other two private foundations. There are two other types of grant makers we'll just briefly touch upon before we go to the Q&A. So corporations can give another way. Instead of setting up a separate private foundation, they can actually have a direct corporate giving program. Now, it's harder to find out about this direct corporate giving because they're not required to file a Form 990. There's no IRS form to find out how these corporations are giving, especially if they're private corporations. The Foundation Center does collect information if the corporation gives publicly. If they acknowledge they're giving publicly, we will have information about that giving. But some corporations are not that open about their giving. So it is a little bit more difficult to find out about this type of giving program, but there are many well-established programs. Many banks will have giving programs for local nonprofits. There might be employee matching gifts funds where a corporation might match the donations of their employees. So there are many ways to approach a direct corporate giving program, including in-kind gifts, gifts of goods or services. So again, we're thinking about different types of approaches depending on the type of grant maker. And finally, grant-making public charities. Those are actually nonprofits who are raising money. Unlike the private foundations, they don't have their own endowment. They may have an endowment, but most of the money they're giving away is actually being raised every year. One type of grant-making public charities we may be familiar with, and if you're not, I really encourage you to get to know your local community foundation. There are many different types of community foundations in areas that are very large, very rural, very suburban. No matter where you are, there's typically a community foundation close to you, and they're a great source of funding and support for the local nonprofits in your area. There's also grant-making public charities that are population or issue-oriented. So if we think about the Ms. Foundation, that's actually a foundation that is raising money and then giving away money for women's issues. And that would also be a company-sponsored grant-making public charity because it comes from a company. So that in brief are a few different types of foundations. When you use the foundation directory online, you can actually choose to search by a specific type of foundation. So that is one way you can also customize your searching. So with that, we're about ready for our Q&A. You are more than welcome to ask me or George any questions that you have.
Yep. So Leeanne, great. Thank you very much. We actually do have a few questions that came in, and for those of you on the phone, we'll try and cover as many questions as we can in the less than 15 minutes that we have. So the first question is, and I think, Leeanne, this may be a question for you. Where are the boot camps held? So I know part of this presentation you talked about a boot camp. Could you talk a little bit more about maybe where it's held, is it online, is it in person?
Sure. Well, currently it's given only in person. As I mentioned, there's a lot of developments coming in 2014, so stay tuned for more online training. But right now they're held in New York, San Francisco, and D.C., with potentially one coming in Atlanta in early 2014. So those are the locations. They're kind of central hubs where we've found populations are able to travel to. And if it continues to be popular, hopefully we'll bring it across the country.
Great, great. And I'm assuming this information on the boot camps is on the Foundation Center website.
Yep, foundationcenter.org/training. You can go there and find all of our training information.
Lovely. All right, so the next question is, where does the information in FDO come from?
That's a good question. There's several sources. The primary one would be the 990 and 990-PF of grant makers. Those include, if it's a PF, it includes a list of all of their grants for that year. Otherwise, it includes the board and trustee names, some of the financials, of course, you know, the name of the foundation, a lot of that basic information. Also, we do go over and above that by getting information directly from foundations, by sending them questionnaires to respond to, and by giving them the ability to send us updates electronically and send us lists of their grants electronically. In addition to that, we have a team of editors, and a lot of what they do is scour foundation websites, annual reports, news releases, and information of that sort to continue to kind of fill out and round out the data and keep it as up-to-date as possible.
Great. The next question is, how often is FDO updated? And I know you talked a little bit about this, but maybe worth repeating.
We update the database continuously, and we push an update to the product once a week. So anything that is new that we get entered in the database will be reflected in the product very quickly. Anytime you're looking at a foundation profile, there's a line up at the top, toward the top of the profile, that says the last time it was updated. So you can actually see when the last update was for any given foundation that you're looking at.
Okay, great. Another question: is there a way to pinpoint which foundations to give to, new recipients versus older or recurring ones?
Well, there's a few things to think about there. So one is, if you're a very new organization, what you might be looking for is a type of support called seed money. Seed money could mean a new program or a new organization. Very few organizations fund nonprofits when they're very new because, you know, there's not as much of a track record. It's a bigger risk. But just like we have some investors in the business world who like to invest in risky situations, we have some foundations who want to invest in startup nonprofits. Now, if you're just entering into the field of foundation fundraising, but you've been around for a while, there's some, you have to get out a highlighter and get out the 990s and start searching to see, you know, what is a giving pattern for a foundation. Do they give to new organizations every year, or is it the same organizations every single year that they give to? They might not say that they give to pre-selected organizations. They might accept applications, but it might be more complicated than that in your research to find out if a foundation actually gives to new organizations every year. And George, do you have any other FDO thoughts about that?
No, I think the seed money example is a good one, a good place to get started. What you might do is in the search grants area, if you happen to know of some recently formed organizations, you could look to see who has given them grants. That works if you have some examples in mind of organizations like your own. If you know that they're new, you can see if they've gotten some grant funds and who's given them. So that's another thing that might point you in the right direction. But Leeanne makes a good point, which is funders will want to see some diversification of funding streams before they're going to make a commitment generally. So, they will tend to look for more established organizations.
Yeah, foundations see themselves as one piece of the pie. It's not, they don't want to be the sole person funding a whole organization typically. Typically, they want to be part of a coalition of funding so that if their funding priorities change, the organization can continue in a strong way.
Okay, great. The next question is, I want to be a grant writer. What course is best for me? And I know, again, this is something that you covered, but maybe worth again one more time.
Sure. So it depends what kind of grant writer you want to be. So if you want to be a grant writer at an organization, or if you want to be a grant writer that focuses on research as well as grant writing, and you want to do like the whole thing for a nonprofit organization, then the boot camp would be right for you because you're looking at budgeting, you're looking at writing, and you're looking at research. If you're strictly wanting to write grants and you don't want to be involved in any of the organizational processes and any of the research, then the one-day proposal writing class would probably be right for you. And if you want to think about corporate giving, that might be a good class for you too, to learn how to do that. But it really depends whether you want to be, really involved with the organizations, and the boot camp would be right. If you just solely want to write the grants, I would start with a proposal writing workshop.
Right, great. The next question is, what would be the best way to find trustees of funding organizations who are connected with members of my board of trustees?
Well, let me go back to,
Could we get the ball back for us, and then George can show that?
Yep, of course. Yep, for you.
So I'm going to bring up my FDO screen again. There's a field for trustees, officers, and donors. If you have the name of a particular trustee that you want to search for, and maybe I'll just pick somebody at random here. What happens when I search for this is I'll find every foundation that this individual has some affiliation with. And then once I open the record, I can see exactly what that is. I will look in the officers and trustees area, and then I see that name. Another thing that you might see would be, if we have it available, okay, so here's a good example. This individual has a list of affiliations. This would be other companies, nonprofit organizations, schools, in some cases, if they're a professor or faculty member. And what other boards do they sit on? What other roles do they have at some of these other places? So you can do a little investigative work that way. If you start with the name of a company or the name of a nonprofit, you can also enter that in that same trustees, officers, donors. So if I did Stanford University, what I'm going to see, this is every foundation where we know of a trustee or officer that has some affiliation with Stanford University. And then you'd open a record to see who that is and what is the nature of that affiliation. So if I just look for it. Okay, so the chair of this foundation's board is a member of the advisory council of Stanford's graduate school. So there are some ways there to make a connection if you know of a name or if you know of a company that you want to search on.
Great. Another question, I think we have time for one more question. Do I get to work on my own proposal?
In our classes, you do. You're not going to leave with your complete proposal written, but you'll bring your own information. You'll fill out an outline, and then use your own program information when we're doing the exercises in proposal writing and in the boot camp. So that's one of the things I think is exciting, because it's something people have been asking for a long time. And when you're able to work on your own stuff, it drives home the points that we're making throughout the class.
Sure. Okay, so with that, we do have a few more questions, and what we'll do for the folks on the phone who did ask those questions, we'll go ahead and answer those questions on our GuideStar blog, trust.guidestar.org. But in the meantime, I just want to close by thanking George and Leeanne for being here very much and walking through the great incentives that you give the GuideStar Exchange, as well as the great incentives of just being a Foundation Center customer. For those of you on the phone, thanks again for being with us. We hope that you enjoyed this presentation and it was useful to all of you. And again, please do visit our blog at trust.guidestar.org, where we'll be answering your questions very soon, as well as your email, watch your email box, because you should be receiving the live presentation in your email box in a couple of days. Thank you very much, guys, and have a great day.